Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a big show. We are going to talk about the results in the NBA last night, the incredible performance of Zion Williamson and his game with the Lakers, as well as the results of the Kings and Warriors, what that means for the rest of the NBA. Is it the end of the Golden State Warriors dynasty? We're also going to talk about the upcoming matchups that are now set in the West, as well as a few other major stories. Jonte Porter is lifetime banned from the NBA, and we'll also cover the NHL a little bit at the end. The final wildcard spot was clinched last night. We'll talk about all of that, but before we get into it, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with the link that's on the screen right now. Leave a message. It'll pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, everybody else around the world that's watching to see. All you need to do is go to that link, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can control what we talk about here on the show. You have a burning question, anything about sports, anything you'd like me to talk about with you, all you need to do is leave that tip or donation with that message, and we will talk about it right here, right now, live on the show. But like I was saying, we're going to start off our show with the Lakers and Pelicans because this was the 7-8 matchup. We now know who is playing the Denver Nuggets in the first round of the NBA playoffs, which kicks off on Saturday, I believe. We have the Lakers, who survive a tough battle with Zion Williamson and the Pelicans. In a game that in the beginning didn't look like it was going to be that tight of a battle. You know, you had the Lakers who were just dominant. You know, the Pelicans could not make a shot to save their lives on offense. CJ McCollum, who coming into the game was one of the hottest scorers in the game of basketball, could not make a basket. Awful efficiency. Brandon Ingram was on a minutes restriction, and even when he was on the floor, he wasn't particularly efficient. And their offense just wasn't getting anything done until about the second half. They were down by as much as 18 points. But Zion Williamson puts up 40 points, 11 rebounds in a masterclass, especially down the stretch. If you were watching the last 5 to 8 minutes of that basketball game, and that's all you saw, you would have thought that Zion Williamson was going to put up Wilt Chamberlain type numbers, 100 points games. You know, he every single time down the court was getting anything he wanted, put back dunks, alley-oops, wide open lanes, just anything he wanted he was getting going. He had 40 points on the night, probably one of his best games of his career in his first career playoff game. Unfortunately, it does come with an asterisk on it, though, as with 3 minutes left in the game, right after he had gone on this huge run to tie it, he has a floater over Anthony Davis, comes down, limps to the sideline. Lakers call a timeout. He goes to the locker room. He doesn't come out for the rest of the game. Comes out today. It's a left hamstring injury for Zion Williamson, and not only that, it's going to keep him out of the next game, at least Friday's game he's going to be kept out of against the Kings, who beat the Warriors, which we will talk about in our next segment. You have now the guy that, honestly, if he played those last 3 minutes, I think the Pelicans would have won that game. And you're going to go into a game against a team in the Kings who, to be fair, did not have their best. Are also down a bunch of players. You know, they don't have Malik Monk. They don't have some of their stars. Injuries for the season. Zion Williamson is a much bigger part of the Pelicans than any of those guys are for the Kings. You saw the Kings last night. We'll get into all of that in a second, but Zion Williamson, that loss is going to kill the Pelicans if they have any hope of making it past the Kings here. It feels like they need him. Now, it's not a situation where they can't overcome it. CJ McCollum goes and returns to form. Before this last game, he had a stretch of, I believe, 6 games in a row where he would make 25 plus points. And, he could return to form there. They don't turn the ball over 7 more times than the opposing team. Jose Alvarado, if you were watching down the stretch, came in, was a huge spark plug. He was causing havoc on defense. He was dishing the ball to Zion a whole bunch. He had this really pretty alley-oop with about 4 minutes to go to tie up the game. The Pelicans down the stretch looked like the better team than the Lakers. And it sucks to see Zion Williamson go down. It really does, because the night he put up 40 points, but he still had 3 more clutch time minutes to go off. I think there's a possibility he could have ended the night in those last 3 minutes with 50 points if he kept playing. And it's a shame. That was his first career playoff game. Injuries have been a big concern of his throughout his entire career. This was the first time that we saw him in the playoffs, and it's a shame to see a talent like that go out, because when he's on, he's on. He's one of the best players in the NBA. We saw it last night, going toe-to-toe with one of the best defenders in the entire league in Anthony Davis, and making it look easy. He was getting whatever he wanted in the paint. It was crazy. He's just big. He's just bigger and stronger than everybody else. But the Pelicans, they are going forward. We'll talk about their matchup with the Kings in just a bit. But the Lakers move on. They play the Nuggets in a rematch from the Western Conference Finals of last year. Last year, that was a 5-game series, and it wasn't all that competitive. You had a team that LeBron was carrying, and they just couldn't stop Nikola Jokic. And it feels like it's going to be a similar series to how it was at the end of last season this year, especially with the game that they've just come off of, with Anthony Davis being unable to stop Zion Williamson. Now, Zion and Jokic play 2 very different styles of games. Zion is big, physical, and Jokic can be big, physical as well, but he's a lot more of a finesse guy than Zion is. And it's a different way to play defense, but the Lakers were getting eaten up on the inside. And having Jokic as the main focal point, the best player in the world right now, going up against what seemed like your biggest weakness last night, at least. And you shouldn't be. That seems like an oxymoron when you have Anthony Davis down low anchoring your defense. But if it's going to look like it did last night, that's going to be a really quick series. You're going to have a situation where Nikola Jokic just, again, gets whatever he wants, does like he did against them in the Western Conference Finals of last year, and you have a 5-game series yet again. I don't really see that big of a chance of the Lakers making it past the Nuggets. The matchup isn't there. Jokic and Murray, Michael Porter Jr., it's going to be too much. Like I said, I think it's almost going to be... You could probably cut and paste exactly what's happened in last year's series, put it into this series, and it would be the same. It's going to be... It might even be a sweep. And I'm giving the Lakers a game, at least 1, maybe 2, because LeBron James and Anthony Davis, they have that star power. They are still very good at basketball, and, they're a 7 seed. They're up there for a reason, but especially in a really, really tough West. But you go up against Jokic, especially coming off the way they did last night, and they can improve. Because like I said, Anthony Davis is one of the best defenders in the world. That's not the kind of performance he's going to have every night. He'll be able to at least slow down Jokic one night, and I truly do believe that. But as far as coming down to, winning a series, it's just night and day between these two teams. I don't think the Lakers really did much to make that big of a leap from where they were a year ago, and Denver didn't really change that much either. So it's going to be a very similar matchup. They're very similar teams. There's obviously a couple pieces moved around on there, but overall, the Nuggets should take that series, have that go into 5 games. I wouldn't be that shocked if it was 4 or 6, but I do think the Nuggets will take that pretty handily. We've got one more game lined up, that between the Kings and the Nuggets. Sorry, excuse me, the Kings and the Pelicans. Like I said, the Pelicans are going to be in that game without Zion Williamson. Maybe we get to see Brandon Ingram in an elimination game not be on a minutes restriction. It was a little frustrating, I'm sure it was as a Pelicans fan, to see your big star on the bench, helpless. And I know he's coming off an injury, but in a situation like it's going to be on Friday night, if you get down to that, you won't have Zion. If CJ McCollum is struggling, maybe you just say, screw the minutes restriction, throw Brandon Ingram in for those last 3 minutes of the game. Get your big guy out there, make those tough shots that you need down the stretch. That's what I would do. It is an elimination game. You're going to coach it a little differently, and obviously player safety is something you want, especially with a young team like the Pelicans. You don't want to just throw it all away to be an 8 seed, because most likely the way that the West is set up this year, even if the Pelicans win this game against the Kings, they're not going to they're probably not going to win it all. You're going to go face a team in the Thunder who, like the Celtics on the other end, have a top 5 offense and a top 5 defense in the entire league. Those are the only 2 teams in the league that have that. It's a very complete Oklahoma City Thunder team, probably the best one that we've seen, definitely the best one that we've seen since KD and Westbrook were both there. So in that matchup, at least, and we'll break it down in more detail when we get closer to it, probably on Friday. We'll break it down a lot more, but you have now these guys, these teams. I think the Kings, with their shooting, it's going to be, we saw what Keegan Murray did last night, and we'll talk all about that coming up in just a second, but their shooting is going to be a huge part of it. The Pelicans, if CJ McCollum can get his touch back, I think they might be able to compete a little bit. They have very similar defensive metrics, at least. Again, they're both very young teams, but I do think that at the end of the day, without Zion, the Kings are going to end up taking this. And New Orleans has dominated that series all year long. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I think that not having Zion is a much bigger factor than, everyone thinks it's a huge factor, but I think if Zion's here, the Pelicans win. He's not. I don't think they're going to do it. And I do think the Pelicans still can, but they need CJ McCollum to shoot well. They need him to have an efficient 20 points or so. And they need Brandon Ingram to also be efficient. So it's going to be tough. I think the Kings will take it. Again, we'll break all of that down more on Friday before the game. But coming up in our next segment, we are going to talk more about those Kings. We're going to talk more about Keegan Murray, and we're going to talk about the Warriors. We're going to talk a little bit about, if that loss, what their future looks like, what the future of the NBA looks like now that maybe the Dynasty is over. So stick around. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replaced all this my sound. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh. feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just finished breaking down the Zion Williamson, LeBron James matchup from last night where the Lakers were able to pull out a victory. They go on to face the Nuggets in the first round of the playoffs. In this segment, we're going to talk about the Warriors and the Kings. A rematch from last year's first round, actually. Went a lot different than it did last year. And we'll talk about why that was, what the future of the Warriors is, and everything like that. But before we do, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation. If you do, leave it with a message. It'll pop up on the bottom of the screen here for you, me, everybody else watching around the world to see. We appreciate anything that you do give. If you leave that message, you can control what we talk about on the show. You have a burning question, a statement, anything at all that you would like to add, contribute, you can control what we talk about. All you need to do, once again, is go to that link, gsmcpodcast.net, that's on the screen right now. Leave a tip or donation. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Appreciate you guys for donating. But like I was saying, in this segment right here, we are going to talk about the Kings and the Warriors. The other play-in game from last night, this was the 9-10. The 10-seed Warriors got blown out. This was the largest win by the Kings against the Warriors since 2005. The Warriors have had the Kings number forever. Steph Curry has had the The Warriors have had the Kings number forever. Steph Curry has had the Kings number forever. He had an excellent game again, so this is not on him. It was more on the decline of the big three, Klay Thompson especially. Keegan Murray had an incredible game. 8 for 13 from 3. 8 threes in a playoff game is insane. Keegan Murray is a shooter, a sniper. He's very good at making the basketball. There were a couple of first quarter especially. He put up 14 points in the first quarter. 4 threes. Insane performance from him. A night where the Kings really, really needed him to step up. The Warriors dominated the second quarter, but after that the Kings locked in. They started making their shots again. The Kings are an interesting team to me. They have really active hands on defense. They force a lot of turnovers, but they're also very sloppy with the basketball. You talk about run and gun kind of offense. They take a lot of threes. They take a lot of not great shots too. They're kind of inefficient, but when you're making it at a high volume and you're taking the ball away from the other team, it works. The Kings are... I'm not sure exactly how well this style of play is going to translate. We talk about them going into New Orleans, another team that's very active on defense. Both of those teams were a little sloppy with the ball. The Kings were a lot more sloppy with the ball than the Pelicans were. It's going to be tough. I think whoever wins the turnover battle in that game is going to end up winning it. Obviously, it comes down to more than that. Shooting, I'm assuming, is going to stay pretty consistent on both of these sides. But this loss for the Warriors, for a lot of people, signals the end of a dynasty. You go look at their payroll. You have Klay Thompson on an expiring contract, Chris Paul on an expiring contract, who both of those guys, they combined for 3 points in the game. Klay Thompson put up nothing. Big old goose egg. And then you have Chris Paul putting up 3 points, 1 rebound, 1 assist. Klay Thompson 0 for 6 from 3, 0 for 10 from the field. Kind of tanks their game. And it was something I talked about yesterday, that Klay Thompson had lost his shot throughout the season. It's going to be tough. He needs to play a good game, and he did not play a good game. You know, you take a look at the state the Warriors are in. They pay the most in the luxury tax right now. almost $177 million. You take a look at, obviously you're not trading Curry, and Golden State wants to continue to compete with Curry because you've won 4 titles with Steph Curry. It's a dynasty, and you don't want that dynasty to end. We're seeing it start to collapse. The big question of this offseason for the Warriors is, what do you do with Klay Thompson? Right? Because Klay Thompson has had an interesting season, right? He was benched at one point for poor shooting. He came back, started shooting great again, been up and down since, and obviously this playoff game. This elimination game, he comes out and he puts up a stinker. Excuse me. Comes out, puts up a stinker in a game that the Warriors were really expecting to win. Obviously, it doesn't work out for them. You have a really, really tough road ahead because they're not in a position where they can go out and they can get these big free agents. Not that they're really going to be willing to go spend that money. They don't have that many assets, assuming they want to continue to compete. They have some young guys they can trade, but if they want to compete in the long term, which their strategy seems to be, we're going to ride Steph Curry as long as we can, but we also don't want to go into a full rebuild. And, keeping guys around like Kuminga is a sign of that. Excuse me. Kuminga is, a guy who had a really solid game. He was a little inefficient, put up 15 shots, but had a solid game nonetheless. You take a look around the rest of that roster, Draymond Green is being paid a lot of money. He is the centerpiece of that team outside of Steph Curry. He's what makes that offense go, really. Everything seems to run through him. But we all know Draymond Green, He's off the court half the time with suspension troubles because he's doing his thing on the court, being Draymond Green. And that's just part of his game. That's just how he plays his game. That's just how it's going to go. But you take a look and you say this seems like an end of the Warriors dynasty, and obviously they're not going to give up. You have a guy in Steph Curry who's playing near top of the league level, all-star level, NBA all NBA team level this season, and he is going. He's a little older. You only have so many years left of this future first ballot Hall of Famer. You can't waste talent like that, and they're gonna do their best to not. But it's getting to the point where you have to look in the mirror and say, hey, is it really worth it to have this big of a payroll? Are we still winning championships? Are we still in the spot where we can compete for championships? Andrew Wiggins' contract is huge. Something that people have been pointing out is, what are you going to do with these huge contracts? You can't really move off of them. They're kind of albatrosses, right? The Warriors are most likely going to sign Klay Thompson back. But you can't justify spending $30 million on Klay Thompson after this season. He hasn't been the same since the injuries, and he just, especially this season, he just was actively hurting your basketball team at times. You can't justify giving him a new $30 million contract for that, especially when you're not that number 1 seed anymore. You're down there competing in the 10 seed. You are competing with the Rockets to barely make the play-in game. It's a fascinating situation, the end of an era, really. Because this has been an era that has, this Golden State Warrior dynasty has defined the NBA for the last 10-odd years, They've won 4 championships. They were the most dominant team in the league. They have the best record of all time with that Kevin Durant team. They have a title outside of the Kevin Durant era as well. They have a title before, they have a title after. It's an excellently run dynasty. They had it going for an incredibly long period of time as well. And you can tell a lot of times how good of a run a team has had by how unified people are in celebration of their downfall. You talk about the New England Patriots in the NFL recently when Tom Brady left. Everyone dancing on their grave. They're done. They're bad. This is so great. We're glad they're done. And it's a similar situation that we're seeing here now. And it's not quite the victory lap as it was because Steph Curry is still on the team. Steph Curry still is being Steph Curry. But this really did feel like the end of the dynasty in Golden State, at least for me. Going out, getting blown out by 20 plus to a team that you've dominated for almost 20 years. A team that has forever kind of been in your shadow, I guess. But it had to happen at some point. The end of the Warriors dynasty. It felt like that's what it was last night. And I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts about that. Do you guys think that it's done? I do. Steph Curry still has some juice left in the tank, but I don't think the Warriors are going to be able to put the pieces around him for them to make a run. And I don't think Steph Curry has the time left for them to really build up. Unless they make some kind of massive move, trading away all their young pieces, which, by the way that they have been doing it recently, I just don't see happening. Now, there's always a chance, but it just the way that they've done things the entire time that they've had Steph Curry, the entire time that they built up this dynasty, sustained it, it doesn't make sense for them to throw it all away for a last-ditch effort at the end. So this really does feel like the end of that Warriors dynasty. But coming up in our next segment, we are going to finish off the NBA. There was big news, an update in the Jonte Porter story. We'll talk about that and more coming up next on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we've just gone over the Warriors and the Kings. The end of the Warriors dynasty, in my opinion, we saw last night, as well as the Lakers and Pelicans in the first segment. In this segment coming up, we are going to do an update on the Jonte Porter situation, violation of the gambling policy. We're going to talk about the incredible news and update that came out about that today, just before the show. But before we do, remember that if you would like to be a bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation. We appreciate anything that you do give. If you do, leave a message with that tip or donation. It'll pop up on the bottom of the screen there for you, me, everybody else watching around the world to see. That message can control what we talk about on the show. You have a question, a burning question, a statement, any hot take, or anything that you would like to contribute to the show, you can decide what we talk about. All you need to do is go to that link on screen, gsmcpodcast.net, leave that tip or donation. We appreciate anything that you do give, and we also appreciate and we also appreciate everybody for watching. But like I was saying, in this segment, we're talking about Jontay Porter. For those who do not remember the Jontay Porter situation, Jontay Porter is a big man for the Toronto Raptors. He was caught in allegations of basically throwing games or throwing lines. There were prop bets on him and for those who don't know, prop bets are, you'll have in a sports book, you can gamble on whether or not a player is going to go over or under certain stats. So for instance, you could say Jontay Porter is going to make more or less than 1 3. And that's where the line was at for one game. And he went to someone who was a known NBA bettor, and he said, hey, I've got this injury. You should probably bet the under on my threes. You should probably bet my under on everything, actually. I think we can make some money. Now, that's not exactly what he said, but that's the gist of what happened. He goes to this bettor he goes to this guy who is a known NBA bettor, and he says, hey, I'm injured, bet my unders. He goes and bets the unders. Jontay Porter plays, he doesn't take a 3. He goes under all of his stats. Boom, big parlay hits. They make lots of money. And this happens on multiple occasions. So this is a player that is actively cooking games, actively throwing games, actively losing to get some money. And this is the dangers of gambling. We all know it. When it's a part of it, there's whole things about it. You can't throw games, can't cook the lines, you can't purposely miss shots, all this stuff. We've seen this before there were rules, or before mobile sports gambling was legalized, and it the industry kind of exploded a little bit. We've seen all of this before. But we've also now had a lifetime ban given out to Jontay Porter. Jontay Porter has a lifetime ban from the NBA. And some people might say that's harsh. Some people might say that's going too far, but no. That's perfect. The MLB did a very similar thing with Pete Rose a long time ago. Pete Rose, who is one of the best baseball players of all time. One of the best hitters. You go to hits leaders all time. He's top 10, maybe top 5 in all of this stuff. He has a lifetime ban from the MLB because of a very similar situation. And now Jontay Porter also gets a lifetime ban from the NBA, and it's well-deserved. I think that the NBA handled this perfectly. You have a really, really tight situation where, especially with the NBA, they have a partnership deal with some of these sports books, something that I personally don't think they should be allowed to have. That's a whole nother point. I just don't think that sports leagues and sports gambling should be paying each other. It doesn't make sense. And it can lead to all kinds of underhanded, icky things, stuff that we don't want. But the NBA has deals with these sports betting companies, and then this happens. And I think they did a really, really good job of handling it. They did a full investigation. They waited for results. They didn't act rashly. And then they dropped the hammer on him. They dropped the hammer on Jontay Porter, and it was needed. This sends a clear and obvious message to any basketball player now in the future. Hey, don't do this. If you do this, you are done. The precedent has been set, and this is what it has to be. Because without integrity, and I've said this before, this is something that, especially in the evolving landscape of sports and sports media and sports gambling, as it continues to become legalized. It's something that needs to be stressed and needs to be figured out so stuff like this doesn't happen on a wider scale. And it's good that we catch it early, and there are warning signs already. There's warning signs already in every league, right? And every league has done, for the most part, a really solid job of handling them. But the hammer went down on Jontay Porter. He has a lifetime ban from the NBA, and it needed to happen. Because now there's a clear and obvious warning for the rest of the league for now and forever. Do not do this. If you do this, you are done. You will never set foot in a basketball arena ever again. And I applaud Adam Silver for doing that. It's not easy to make that decision sometimes, and I'm sure it was made a little bit easier by the fact that Jontay Porter is not a star in the league. Be honest with me. How many of you guys have heard of Jontay Porter before this happened? I know that I hadn't. I had to go do a whole bunch of research on this guy before I started talking about him, because I had never heard of him before this. You know, seen him play, never really paid him much mind, backup center on the Toronto Raptors. You take a look at what this could have done to the sport of basketball if they let this go. You don't want to get there. You don't want to get in that situation where you are, running out of time, where you don't have the integrity, you don't have the trust of the public in a sporting event. Because without that, it's no fun, right? You either need to say that it's, in that situation, because you could get to a point where slippery slope, it's all scripted. And this is a really hard line to draw, and they needed to do it. I applaud Adam Silver for drawing this line. I really do. The NBA has set a strong example that I think every sport should follow in. The NFL was a little bit lighter on Calvin Ridley because it was betting on his own team, but still, not something that you'd like. Not something you'd like to do. Not something that you want to deal with. It was only a 1-year ban, but it maybe should have been worse. It was indefinite. They gave him a trial to get back in. He said, "Yep, I'm back," and they let him back in. A little bit of a different situation there, but still, as long as the sport has integrity, you have the ability to continue to let it grow, and that's the most important thing. Because the NBA is growing, and it's growing really quickly. Basketball is one of the fastest growing sports in the world, and if something like this is left unchecked, the NBA would collapse, I guarantee it, in the next 50 years. Now, that seems like a long time, because I'm not going to project the NBA collapsing in 10 years. They handled this great. I'm very, very happy the way that they handled this. This had to happen. Way to go, NBA. Great decision. It's not easy to make the right decision all the time. Jontay Porter gets a lifetime ban. And it really highlights the need to separate gambling from sports itself, right? And it's impossible to actually do because the sports gambling exists and it's only getting more popular. But it needs to happen. Something that I truly believe, and also that I think the media needs to do a better job of separating. Like, something that personally bugs me with this is that every single piece of coverage of live sports nowadays, you look at the UFL is one of these examples of this that actually we can just stick in the NBA actually, because we were talking about this. They have a partnership. You go to NBA TV, they have live lines on the NBA TV app now. And it's integrated. And the UFL example, like I was saying, is you have these live lines on the score bug at all times, or the opening lines on the score bug. You have the over-under, you have the spread, and it's on the score bug at all times. And it's just Excuse me. Alright, I apologize about that. Anyway, there needs to be some kind of separation between these two things, sports gambling and sports, and there needs to be a clearer line because it's starting to get more blurred in sports media, especially as well. The way that we cover it, we're part of the problem, but that's a whole nother issue for a whole nother day. In our fourth and final segment, we are going to talk a little bit about the WNBA draft. The WNBA draft happened 2 days ago. I didn't have time to talk about it yesterday, but today we're going to cover the aftermath of that, everything that goes along with that as well. So stick around. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found. For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back, everybody, to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the Jonte Porter situation. He received a lifetime ban from the NBA earlier today for his role in a gambling situation with prop bets. Right move. We also finished talking about the play-in games that happened last night, as well as previewing the next matchup between the Lakers and Nuggets and the Pelicans and Kings. Also, end of the Warriors dynasty, I believe we just witnessed. In this fourth and final segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the WNBA draft. I missed talking about that yesterday, just did not quite have enough time to cover it. But we're going to cover that today, right now. We're going to talk about all the big moves, big surprises, some of my favorite picks from the later rounds, all that stuff, and more. But before we do, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen, and you can control what we talk about on the show. You put a question in there, that's what we'll talk about there. You can control the content of the show. All you need to do is go to the link on screen right now, gsmcpodcast.net. Like I was saying, though, in this segment, we're going to talk about the WNBA draft. We have a situation where the women's basketball, especially women's college basketball, has had a moment. And it's awesome to see. The women's basketball WNBA draft had 2.6 million people watching. It was the most people that's ever watched the draft. That's coming off a year where the women's Final Four and the women's finals were watched more than the men's Final Four and the men's finals. It is crazy, and it's awesome to see. And I hope that continues, but we had a lot of huge megastars. This might be one of the best draft classes in the history of the WNBA. Obviously, number one overall, you had Caitlin Clark, who is the face of women's basketball right now. She goes to Indiana, on the Indiana Fever, joining last year's number one overall pick, Aaliyah Boston. You have Cameron Brink out of Stanford going number 2. But Caitlin Clark here, obviously she is going to change the face of basketball. You go and you look at the amount of hype that surrounds her. I mean, she had her number retired. She had her number on the court while she was still playing. She had her number retired while she was still playing. That doesn't happen. That just straight up does not happen. The top 3 players in this draft are all elite talents, and you can even go as far down, Angel Reese goes number 7 overall, she is a special talent as well, but the top 3, Caitlin Clark, Cameron Brink, Camila Cardoso, who anchors that South Carolina, she's a center, she's 6'7", huge. She goes 3rd overall. In any other draft class, those two guys, those two players, they would both go number 1. But they can't. They go 2, 3. Angel Reese goes 7 to LA. Aaliyah Edwards from UConn goes number 6. JC Sheldon from Ohio State goes 5. There's only 12 teams in the leagues. We saw all 3 rounds. One player that I want to shout out is Kiki Jefferson. Kiki Jefferson out of Louisville, went to my school, James Madison, beforehand. She is very special. She lands She lands in Minnesota, playing for the Minnesota Lynx. She is very good. She was the leading scorer in Louisville, and I wish her the best of luck in the WNBA. Very cool to see Dukes out there. But also Abby Hugh out of Columbia, going 34th overall to the Connecticut Sun. She's a shooter. She can add a lot of spacing in this draft. And women's talent is only good. Juju Watkins at USC is still there. Paige Beckers is still there. The draft classes are going to continue to grow, and maybe we see momentum from here rise, and we see the start of something where the WNBA can become independent from the NBA, where the WNBA can start making money. Caitlin Clark's contract is $76,000 for the first couple years, and for those who remember, she was offered $5 million to go play in Ice Cube's Big 3 league. So it's a bit of a pay cut for her, but she's going to grow this league exponentially. And it's awesome that she decided to go to the WNBA, play for the Indiana Fever, grow that market. Indiana is a huge basketball state. I mean, we see the Pacers, we see the Hoosiers. Indiana is huge in basketball, and it's good to see that market growing. Obviously, Caitlin Clark, already from the Midwest, it's not going to be too big of an adjustment for her, but she is a megastar already. She went on Saturday Night Live right before the draft. She is just a megastar, not just in the WNBA, not just in basketball, but in the world. She's already a celebrity beforehand. It's going to be so good for the game. I'm excited to see what she can bring to the table for the WNBA in the future. We'll have to see exactly what that entails. But this might be the best draft class of all time in the WNBA's history. There were a lot of really, I mean, you go all the way, you can go all the way down to the, like I said, the bottom of the third round was still really good. In the second round, you're getting Nika Mule out of UConn. You're getting Kylina Trung out of Gonzaga. All these huge names are going, and we're getting into later rounds. We might be able to see an expansion of the game soon. It's very exciting to see how big the WNBA is going to get. This is the time to get in it if you haven't, because this is when it's about to explode. Very excited for future of women's basketball. Congratulations to Caitlin Clark going number 1 overall. This was a stacked class. All 3 of those players are number 1 overall pick worthy. And Angel Reese goes 7. This is just a loaded, stacked class. But anyway, thank you everybody so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Tomorrow, we'll be back here, same time, same place, talk about some NFL minicamp, talk about some Bill Belichick, all of that and more. I will see you then. You guys have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.